Israel's military says that it has freed a 52-year-old Arab-Israeli hostage who was taken by Hamas on October 7th of last year. The IDF says the man is alive. Now, this news comes as the Middle East has been at a boiling point for months now. The war in Gaza is in its 10th month, with little signs of a permanent ceasefire ever coming into existence. Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah, a proxy for Iran, have been lobbing missiles at each other, culminating in a major confrontation over the weekend.
Well, experts believe that both parties have de-escalated, at least for now, and averted a wider war. The region is still on edge. About 150,000 displaced Israelis and Lebanese are waiting to return to their homes along the countries on the border. Now, or rather, along the country's border. The violence between Iran and Israel cannot be divorced from the war at Gaza, where 40,000 people officially and potentially much more have been killed. The U.S. has sent warships to the region and has no plans of pulling them out. So, what's happening on the ground and what comes next? Here to unpack this all is Hussain Abdul-Hussain, a research fellow with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He's a former journalist who was managing editor for Beirut's Daily Star and also covered many conflicts in the region as a reporter. So things are heating up there on Israel's border with Lebanon. What do you see here? Do you see there to be potential for Iran and the United States to become more heavily involved and a wider war still on the horizon?
We haven't seen any sign that Iran intends to get involved in this. This war started on October 8th, the day after Hamas committed a massacre that killed 1,200 Israelis. And that, according to Hezbollah, Hezbollah started this war to support Hamas in its war against Israel. Since then, we have had some sort of a low intensity warfare, war, if we can call it as such, but the two sides have been clashing. The United States has offered Hezbollah to cease fire, that is to stop shooting in return for Israelis also stop shooting. But Hezbollah has insisted on tying its war on Israel to whatever is going on in Gaza. And as long as the situation is like this in Gaza, I don't see that the war on the northern border of Israel, the southern border of Lebanon, would stop.
Where are we in terms of getting a ceasefire in place between Israel and Hamas? That's something we heard a lot of at the DNC last week. Kamala Harris said there needed to be a ceasefire, so did other speakers. But my understanding is that the Israeli government, the Israeli side, still takes the position that Hamas needs to be utterly defeated in order for there to be a permanent peace plan in place. So is it still the case that the U.S. government is somewhat far apart from where the Israelis are?
No, there are these are two different concepts. You have the ceasefire on one hand, you have the permanent ceasing of hostilities on the other, and then a third step would be peace, which we're still far from. The UN resolution that the United States drafted and got endorsed instructs Israel to withdraw from residential neighborhoods in Gaza and return for a 40-day ceasefire during which there should be an exchange of hostages between the two sides. Now, Hamas has not really given thumbs up to this plan. It tends to confuse the phases. The resolution has 3 phases. So it jumps back and forth between the 2 phases. I think the Israelis have said, if you want a ceasefire of 40 days for the exchange of hostages, and then after that, we discuss permanent cessation of hostilities, then we're open to that. So Hamas has not really shown any readiness. I think Hamas think that they can get some concessions from Israel meanwhile. But personally, I haven't seen any signs that we're moving in any positive direction. I think as things go, we will still see clashes in Gaza, albeit at a much lower intensity than we saw over the past few months.
Now, of course, the warships being sent to the Middle East isn't the extent to the US's involvement. Of course, they're the main funder of Israel and have a lot of influence over what unfolds in the Middle East. How do you see these two potential paths of a Trump presidency or a Harris presidency differing for the outcome of the region?
Well, I think sometimes we have to be modest enough to think that we are not the only party that decides, neither the United States nor Israel. There are other players in the region. And these players, if they decide that they don't want to settle for peace, then there'll be no peace. So peace needs two to tango. Israel withdrew from Lebanon per UN Security Council Resolution 425 in the year 2000. That's 24 years ago. And until today, there has been no peace. So peace requires more than the intention, more than the withdrawal, more than the diplomatic pressure. The difference between Harris and Trump, I wouldn't say would be big. Maybe Trump would tend to give Israel more freedom of action, but I wouldn't say that Harris would stop U.S. support to Israel. Now, we have seen so far 10 months, 11 months of Harris as vice president and President Biden. I don't think the Biden administration has been able to do what it wanted to do. And this is basically because we have Hamas that refuses any permanent settlement. Hamas refuses to recognize Israel, to talk to Israel. Mind you, all of these negotiations have been through third party because Hamas refuses to talk to the Israelis. As long as we have Iran that pledges to destroy Israel, as long as we have Hezbollah that refuses any sort of peace and wants to support Hamas in its fight. So we have other parties with a proclaimed goal of destroying Israel. As long as this is the case, no matter how much peace we call for here in the United States, or we pressure Israel into accepting, I don't think we will see peace.
Now, we have some breaking news that a hostage has been obtained by Israel through a complex operation, one that was taken by Hamas on October 7th. Do you see this changing the landscape at all?
I don't think it changes much in terms of what's unfolding on the ground. But what I think the irony is that this is an Arab Israeli Muslim man who was taken hostage by Hamas that proclaims to be a Muslim organization. And this is Israel who's sending in its troops to save this Muslim man from Hamas. So I think this has a lot of symbolism that we can unpack, but I don't think it has any effect or influence on whatever is unfolding on the ground in Gaza.
Hussain Abdul-Hussain, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.